All right, what is up, everyone? I'm trying to stream for the first time, so I want to make sure I can actually like watch this. I'm gonna ask my wife if she can actually see this. Yo, Tina, can you see me? Can you hear me? Hear this? Stream URL. I think if I go directly to this, uh, I mean, I guess it's working. If anyone's watching, can you just type in the chat? It says live. Let's see if the audio sounds okay. Cool, seems legit. All right, so in this video, I am going to be trying to use test-driven development to build up a, let me share my actual webcam. There we go. Cool, so the plan is I want to build up a REST API using Express, and I'm going to be doing test-driven development to try to get that created. So over here, I have my VS Code set up, and I'm just going to go ahead and install a couple of things. Since we're only messing with a Express server, I'm not going to like do a client or anything. So let's just init an npm project, and I'm going to install a couple of things. I think we could just install Express, and we should be good to go. And while that's loading, let me load up Postman. Do I not have Postman installed in this thing? I got REST Advanced Client. Let's use that. All right, so make a new JavaScript file, and the idea here is not sure why my font's all, my background color is a little bit different. Let's see. Yo, this stream is killing my CPU right now. Let me just close out of this. Pause that. All right, let's see. Const app is equal to express. So let me make an actual app by calling express, and then down here I could say app.get on slash, and I'm just going to return some data here. So listen on port, oops, I'll do 5000. And I'm just going to go ahead and run this just to verify that I can actually hit this endpoint. So if everything is running successfully, I should be able to use Postman and use a GET request on that endpoint, and we get back hi. Okay. So I set up an Express service with a URL and a port. But what we're trying to do here is actually like store data. 1 second, I'm getting a text. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I need to bring in Mongo as well. So MongoDB, npm. There should be a package I can use just to bring in Mongo and start connecting to a Mongo database. And I did this before in a previous video. I could probably just find that code and copy and paste it. Let's see. So we should be able to do an npm install on this, bring in MongoDB, and then we should be able to read from it. All right, let's just try all this stuff and see what happens. So I'm going to get to test-driven development in a second. I'm just setting up the actual API first. So I'll name the database TDD Express. Actually, I'm going to do another, like the ideas approach again. So I'll do TDD ideas, connect to my local running MongoDB. We don't need a cert, MongoDB client. I'm assuming we should be able to do an await on this. Let's try that. So if I put all of my code in here and just await on Mongo client, let's see if that actually works. That should return me the client here. And then we should be able to get the database and close it at some point, but we don't need to do that. Yeah, let's try I'm gonna also install NodeMan so I can just restart my service as I make changes, but what I just want to do right now is on this endpoint, I just want to try if I can get some data from MongoDB. I think it's like called collections. And I can say ideas. Let me go back and make sure I'm not messing something up. DB collection, and then you can do like insert mini. All right, so we'll do const ideas is equal to db.collections of ideas, and then I can say ideas of find. I think it's find. Pass it that and see what that returns us. I'm kind of doing this off of memory, so I'm gonna have to go back and actually sorry, I'm jumping around right here. So I'm gonna do a start script here, just runs nodemon on my index file. And then in my terminal, I can do npm start to actually spin up that server. And let's see what happens. So this crashed. Wait is not defined, so I need to put async here. Let's see. I could add this in a bit. So let me see what happens if I call this endpoint again. Do we get an error? So get request on slash, and what happens? The URL cannot be requested. Oh, let's see. Well, setting up MongoDB connection. And we are here. I need to disable that. I have like auto formatting that happens when I paste code in, and it's not that useful. All right, so let's go back. What's going on here? Unhandleable promise. So I'm assuming this is throwing like a try catch or throwing an exception. So let me just go ahead and catch that and console log that just to verify what's going on. I might just run this in my debugger in a second if I can't make progress on this. It's hard to actually code when my CPU is like, oh, client is not defined. Okay. So client is supposed to be returned after doing a wait here. So that is probably what's causing me issues. Client is not defined. We're still running to the issue, and I think that's because I have it in try catch. Let me, oops. This is painful. All right, I think we finally connected to the MongoDB server. And I should be able to actually hit that endpoint, which I can't. So let's actually look up how to do a find in MongoDB. You know, let's just stop looking at their docs. I've done this before in a previous project, so I'm going to just go to that project. This is like the view one where I try to connect to do like the video ideas. I should be able to load up server, load up DB. And I could probably just reuse all this code here. So get client, connect to something, and then client.db. Do I do that? We do. And that is also a promise, I believe. Maybe it's not. Okay, so let's look up, how do we do that in our actual handlers? So we have get ideas handlers, which calls get client, client.collection. We don't need to do a wait on that, but we do need a wait on find to array. Okay, I'm still just trying to get this code set up, so I'm not like truly understanding what I'm doing right now. All right, I'm gonna actually run this in the debugger here. Let me just run the debugger. Okay, at this point I should be able to hit my endpoint. We're in the debugger now. Let's step over and see where it's starting to crash. We have an ideas collection here, and then we're trying to await on this. We get back an array of empty object, or empty array. Okay, so it's finally working. It took a lot of work to get that going. Let me stop this. All right, let me make sure my stream is actually going because I don't want to be talking to myself. All right, so what I'm attempting to do here is I want to kind of do test-driven development to store ideas to a database and get ideas back. So people can pretty much like post ideas for YouTube videos. And then like if you saw the view video I did before, I had a back end where you could upload ideas and you could vote on them and stuff like that. But I wanted to redo that using test-driven development just to mainly get experience using TDD. And I know the approach of doing it. I just haven't really gotten to the habit of doing it, but I think it would help out a lot. So to achieve that, there's a couple of things we want to do to refactor this code to make it set up so testing is a little bit easier. And we're going to be using Jest to test. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a router file, which basically just, actually exports router. It's going to export a property called router, which takes in an app, and then that is going to call different routes. So for example, it's going to call this route here, which that's not going to work because we don't have all this database related code. So before I dive into that, let's make a routes folder here. And I'm going to just add an endpoint called get or create idea. How about that? So create idea handler. And what this handler is going to do, actually I'm going to say handler factory. So this is going to be a factory function where I can pass in some things that are kind of requirements. And I'm going to be doing inversion of control so I can pass things in, and that just allows it to be more easily tested and mocked out when you're trying to do like mocking out of the MongoDB data store or whatnot. And I think this will all make sense. I'm kind of just jumping around, getting used to doing a live stream. But okay, so back here, we had our index file, which sets up our server and then hosts it on port 5000. And then before that, we connect to our MongoDB database, and we connect to the database name here, which is TDD ideas. And then we want to set up our router. So I'm going to pass app to our router and make sure we import that. So router equals require dot slash router. So now basically all of our routes are going to be defined in this router, and this code should be a little bit cleaner. And what I can also pass in here is the actual database object. So in here, we could say, I'm actually going to do this. I like doing my parameters like this. Just makes it easier to know like what stuff is. So we'll pass app and DB into the router, and then the router is responsible for creating all of these routes. So at this point, we can pull all this code out and put it into a separate file here, which we have like this. And that is going to return a express function. So this returns a rec-res and does some stuff with it. So we're doing a create. Okay, so the first endpoint I want to do is a create idea handler. So I'm going to do a post request to ideas. And I'm going to just simply import that create idea handler factory. And that is in my routes / create idea handler factory. And again, the whole idea of having this being a factory is I can just pass in the dependencies that I want, like so. In this case, it just depends on DB. And then you can just pass that down your layers and your interactors and whatever your persistence is going to end up calling this. So when we call this method, actually this needs rec-res as well. So rec-res, that is going to return us a function. What am I doing here? Let's see. Am I making this overly complex? Probably am. So I'm trying to make an endpoint. I can do a post request to /ideas. And I want to do a factory function for this handler so that I can pass in dependencies. But this needs to return a function that has rec and res in it, which it does here. Okay, so what I need to do here is just have db, and that is going to return a rec res. All right, making progress. This will make sense in a second. So the handler is going to invoke an interactor. So I'm going to create an interactor file. In fact, I will add that to a different folder called interactors. And I'll move that into that folder there. So this will export a property called create idea interactor. And this endpoint is basically just going to invoke that and pass it db. And we will put all this logic inside of this interactor. And we'll clean this up in just a second, but okay, so we have our route here, which invokes this factory function, which will return us an express callback function. And this express callback function has access to this database now. So I could connect to the database and do things. And what I want to do here is this interactor. I talked about doing TDD, so I should probably write a test before I actually implement all this stuff. Let me just comment all this out and do that. I'm kind of scared to look at the comments of this stream. People are probably going to destroy me for being so confused. 404 not found. All right, so I want to do a post request to that new endpoint that we created. It returns testing. So our endpoint actually works. So the idea, let me just check really quick. Okay. Again, the idea is we're trying to do test-driven development. So we need to bring in a library to actually do testing. So one of them that I've used before is Jest. So if I do npm save dev Jest, you probably can't see that. So I'll run it here. That'll bring in the Jest framework. And I'll probably have to look at the docs to figure out how to actually get that going. But typically you just do like npm test here. So if I make a test script, and I say jest. Usually that will find all your like .test files and just run them. I'll probably have to tweak that just a little bit. Maybe it's like jest of dot, but starting off, we should probably create a test file for this endpoint that we're trying to verify. So I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm going to start with integration tests. So I'm going to say integration. Whoops. And inside of this integration folder, I'm going to add a test called create idea. I don't know, .test.js. Always rename stuff. And what this test needs to do is we need to basically hit our endpoint of our running app and verify that we can create an idea or that an idea gets returned back to us. So to do that, there is probably something we could use called like super test, or we could probably just use like Axios to make the request. There's probably a lot of ways you can do this. But I want to be able to run this with not actually spinning up my REST service. Like I want to just be able to test at my interactor level and not have to. I guess I could just test this stuff too. All right, anyway. Let me take a break and think about what I'm trying to do. So this is my first live stream, so if I'm like jumping around and stuff, cut me some slack, please, because I don't really know what I'm doing right now. So I just know I want to do TDD to build up a REST API. All right, so I want to create a test to verify, create an integration test to verify the post @/ideas works. Right, simple enough. That's what we're trying to do. Create an integration test to verify that post @ideas works. And the main idea of test-driven development is you write your tests first and make sure that they fail, right? So you do red, green testing. So I was kind of going down the path of implementing stuff because that's what I'm used to. And that's the whole point of the stream is I want to get out of that habit of just like writing code. I want to write my tests first, make sure my test actually fails, and then try to implement to make that test pass. So in order to create an integration test, I could probably read about this. There's probably a lot of libraries or frameworks out there that could help me. But I think one of the easier things you could do is probably just like import Axios or something where you can do a post request. So let's just do that. And if anyone has any suggestions, feel free to like, I don't know, leave a comment. So right now that's just a dev dependency. So I'm going to just import Axios there. And while that's installing, I'm going to, what am I going to do? Okay, so verify the create. Actually, for describe, I'm going to say create post @ideas. How about that? That's what we're testing. We're testing an endpoint. And inside of this describe block, we can put more it statements to say should create an idea. To create and return an idea with a status of 200. How's that? So that is a test that we are trying to write using Jest. So if we go here, let's import Axios. And I should be able to actually use it. What else do we need to import? I think we could just have access to like jest.expect and stuff. So we probably don't have to import jest. But starting off, let's just see if we can actually make a GET request here. So Axios or a post request. I need to actually look up the docs for this. All right, so we installed Axios. I want to do a post request, which is an example here. So if I just paste that in, I should be able to do a post request to ideas, pass it something. So let's just say the idea is going to have a description of make a live stream of doing TDD in Express. That's the description. And our endpoint is supposed to save that idea that I posted in to a database and then probably return us a new idea with an ID on it or something. Now I'm going to use async await here. I don't like these promise chains. So I should be able to say result is this. So just make sure that there's a result that comes back. And for right now, let's just go ahead and console log that. And one thing I noticed is that NodeMon keeps on restarting even though I'm changing like the integration test stuff. I could probably fix that, but I'll look into that in just a second. So I should be able to run npm test, and I hope it runs Jest over my code. And that should find my create idea.test.js, and it looked like it did. And let's actually see what happened. So if I go up, we got a network error. Awesome. Connection refused. Oh, duh. Okay, so obviously I need to do, I need to actually test the real endpoint, right? So localhost 5000. I'm gonna say to do don't hard code localhost in 5000. Right, that's, we can fix that later, but let's try it again. Let's try running it and see if that actually hits my endpoint. Minimize this and just expand it like that. Cross origin localhost is forbidden. So I've ran into this issue multiple times in the past. I just need to install a cores header. npm install save cores. And then if I go to my index and I go to app, I could say app.use cores, and then I should probably require cores here. Let's see. So while that's installing cores, I'm gonna go drink some coffee real quick. Let me check if anyone, there's probably a better way to do YouTube streaming. What's up, Stolik Nair? Is that how you say it? How's it going? Welcome to the stream. Okay, so it says I have 5 viewers right now. I hope everyone is on the same page as what I'm trying to do, because I don't know what I'm trying to do right now. All right, let's just close everything and take a breather and recollect my thoughts. Just close all this too. So, I am trying to write a test that verifies that my endpoint, which is at localhost 5000/ideas, will return us something when we do a post request to that endpoint. And we ran into a cores issue where I needed to install a cores module, which I did, and I think it should be running now. So what I can do is I can go back to my other terminal where I was running Jest, do npm test, and see if it works. Awesome. So we got something back from our server now. Now, obviously, we're not actually expecting anything or asserting anything, but we did get result back, and you see here we got data in status. So again, the test that we're writing, let me minimize this. The test we're writing, we're trying to verify that we get a status of 200, which we saw Um, there's result.status. So what I can do in Jest, this is like a global that's provided to you. You can say expect result.status to equal 200. Awesome. So let's rerun our test. And this takes a while to run just because my laptop's not that powerful. Cool. So you've noticed here, it returned us a status of 200. And we can also expect that the result dot data matches something that we'd expect, right? I'm just gonna say to match object. This is a way to do like kind of fuzzy matching where, or subset matching. So let's say the server returned us a huge JSON payload of like 1,000 properties, and we just want to verify that it has like maybe one or two. We could say to match object and then pass it this description. And obviously you don't want to copy and paste code, so I'm going to just go up here and say description is equal to this. Description, did I spell that right? Yeah, so the description we pass in should ultimately be the description that is returned to us in this test. So let's rerun this, and at this point, my test should fail because we are not returning an object back. We return a string on our endpoint. So if I maximize this and scroll up, you can see that just said, hey, you expected something, but you got back a string. Let's see, match or error. Received value must be a non-null object. Received has type string. Received has value testing. So not the most descriptive Jest error, but we know that our test is failing. So the idea is you can go into your handler, or your interactor, I mean. So I have a create idea interactor. Or is it the handler? I don't remember this point. Oh yeah, so this is just returning a express function. And if we wanted this test to pass, we could simply just say description of, I don't know, whatever that was. But that's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to actually pass in data. So step one, we got the failing test. Now we need to make our endpoint actually do what we want. So in order to get their endpoint working, we have the handler factory, which returns this express function. And we need to get the payload that was sent in, which I don't think we sent. Did we send a payload? We did. We sent in a payload. So if you know how Express works, we can print out the payload by using rec.body. Go ahead and close this one. And now if I use Postman and try to send in a body here, description of something, and click send, I should probably send back that. Give me 1 second. So if you're using Express and you try to hit an endpoint and you notice that's just like sitting there forever, you probably have forgot to wait on a promise. But yeah, so I sent in this payload description of what is up, and over here it printed out undefined, and that's because I totally forgot to set up something called body parser. And I think Express has something you can do. Like I think I can say app.use express.json. Maybe? I was watching a YouTuber stream and he used this approach. I've always included body-json to get that working, but okay, so now we actually have a console log that prints out what is up. So that's how we get the body that was passed in. So what I like to do in my handler functions is these are just really basic pass-through methods that basically take what was passed in Express and send it to your interactor. And the main reason I'm doing this is because you don't want your like rec and res getting into your business logic. That should be isolated. There should be a fine line between like, this is all Express related, and this is all like my actual business logic. So if I ever decide that I don't want to use Express and I want to use like GraphQL or Amazon Lambda, you don't have rec and res passed all throughout your code, which would make it pretty much impossible to refactor without spending a ton of time. So that is why I'm kind of doing this. And we'll talk about this factory, why I'm doing the factory in just a second. But Let's create / import the interactor if we haven't already. So I'm going to say interactors / create idea interactor. And we're just going to assume that this is a promise, right? All of my interactors are just going to be async because they're going to talk to database. So it's just safe to assume that it's going to be async. But what we can do here is assume that this create ideas interactor is going to return us some data. And I think this is another good opportunity to stop writing this component and do TDD, right? We haven't actually created this component yet. So let's go to our interactors and we have this, right? We have this blank file with nothing actually working. So I'm going to do a blank file and let's see, what do I want to do here? It takes in DB, but we won't really use it yet. We'll say it takes in DB and it takes in a, I don't want to say body, but I want to say an idea. Okay, so let's, again, try to do TDD to create a unit test to verify that this interactor does what it's supposed to do. And at this point, I don't know if it's really going to do much other than just call a DB function. You know what? Let's take a step back. Let me just take a step back. So another approach, typically what you do is you isolate all your database calls inside of like a data access object. That's what you do in like Java. It's called like a DAO. I forget what that's design pattern's called. There's an actual like real design pattern for doing that. Let me check my texts. Underrated channel. Hope it grows big soon. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm trying to grow it. I've gotten like 80 plus subscribers in the last 28 days. So, I mean, that's progress. Yeah. So what was I doing? I was going to drink some coffee. That's what I was going to do. Let's see. Hope this stream actually gets saved to YouTube when I'm done. I think it does, but all right, so I was going to write a unit test for this function, but I decided this function doesn't really do much yet because we haven't abstracted away the database service. So let's do yet another folder here called persistence. And inside persistence, that's where we're going to have our data access objects. So I'm going to do a create idea DAO. You can name it whatever you want. I'll just call it create idea because if it doesn't have a suffix like interactor, you can assume it's a DAO. So exports create idea, and this is a function which takes in that database object and it takes in the idea. So I think what we can do here is we could probably do some type of unit testing for real. And DB is that MongoDB object now at this point. So remember how in the index we created this MongoDB stuff. This is basically what's being passed in all the way through. And there should be, and that's actually not a good idea. We shouldn't pass DB all the way through. So what I actually want to do is I want to, this could be a factory as well. You know what, we'll just continue on with what we got and we can change it later, but it's not the perfect approach for having a clean architecture, but it's a step in the right direction, I guess. So again, let's go back to create idea. What this function needs to do is it actually needs to write data into Mongo. So I'm going to make a test called create idea test. Sure, save that. And that's going to describe. And that has an it does no. Sometimes I hate autocomplete. So we have a describe, and that describe is going to be create idea, which calls a function that has an it in it, and that should invoke MongoDB's create method with expected parameters or something like that. How do you create stuff in Mongo? This is important to know. Is it called insert? MongoDB insert? Insert one? Gotta go to the docs. This just doesn't have what I need. Go back. I saw CRUD. CRUD operations. That's probably what we want. We want insert one. All right, so that is how you do an insert one here. Okay. So again, we're not going to paste that code in. I just want it as a reference because that is the signature we're going to call. We're going to do db.collection.insert1 or something like that. So TDD is kind of confusing to me sometimes. So, okay, so first off, let's just include the function that we're trying to test, which is called create idea. And if you remember, that create idea has a signature of db and idea. So in order to get this to kind of work, we're going to try to mock out some stuff. So I'm going to say const result is equal to await create idea. Going to be passed td and then also an idea with a description of hello world. And the idea is that we should expect result to match object of description. So this method should return us an object that has a description in it and probably an ID or something else. But the issue is that we haven't actually implemented anything. So we do have a failing test at this point. So if I wanted to just run this test by itself, you can do that in Jest by just saying npx jest persistence create idea.test. Come on now. Assuming I don't have any syntax errors, that should start running tests over that file. Okay, so await. Okay, I forgot that async. So async, we're going to call create idea and expect that it returns us an object with a description. How long have I been streaming for? Where is, does it have like a stream length? I don't know. We'll keep going. Actually, someone texted me right when I started, so let me double check. .235 is when I started, so I might have to actually, whenever my kid wakes up, I'm gonna have to drop, so. I'm hoping I can get one endpoint like tested and fully implemented, but we'll see. So we have a test that's failing, so that is what we want. We want to start with the failing test and then go into the implementation and try to implement something. So what we can do is inside of this create idea function, we can say db.get or db.collection of ideas. And if you remember that code we copied, we could say insert one and do some stuff. And we just want to insert the idea that was passed in. And that is going to, I don't know what all this other stuff is. You have to look that up. But I should be able to just say await. Also, another thing I don't know about Mongo is I think you want to keep the connections open, right? Or are you supposed to close connections after every time you do an operation? I know typically you keep the connections open. You have like a connection pool, but Yeah. Okay, so if we wanted to test this function, what we need to do is just return. What does this actually return to us? I don't remember what insert one actually returns, so I probably need to go to Mongo and insert one. Where's that reference? I thought I had it up here. Okay, insert one. Like, what does that return? And how do I get the object that was insert document? Go to the API. Let's try to find insert one. Insert one. I hope they have some example of the payload that comes back. What is this? Those are the options. Really? Do they not actually have what comes back? It just comes back with a promise. Okay, what is in the promise? This is in the promise. So I should be able to say .ops, which is an array of things that were inserted, and just get the first result. Okay, so for our test, what we're trying to do is we're trying to mock out this create idea DB object here, right? And we want to mock out how the actual API that MongoDB uses. So what it does is we have a method called collections, or collection, which is going to return back the ability to do an insert one, like that, which is a method that is just going to return us an object with ops and an idea. So const idea is equal to description of hello world. And I like to make these in all caps if I know that they're like a test entity. So I'm going to do idea, and then that is going to return an array of that idea. Oops. Let me paste that here. What did I do here? Idea. So the idea that we pass in to our function should be the same idea that is returned back, but it's probably going to modify some data. But we, I guess, don't really need to care about that too much. Like technically you have like an ID. So usually it's idea with like an ID here. And sometimes you don't even mock out your persistence layer. Like some people don't mock this stuff out and test it, which is probably fine because your integration tests are going to be verifying this. But if you do want to just get experience with testing this stuff, it's good to just practice, I guess. So this is the idea that's in idea input idea posted. How about that? Yes, read this. I'll just do idea, whatever. Sometimes I get caught up with trying to name stuff, but so the idea is this endpoint. If I minimize some of this stuff, when you call create idea, you're going to pass it this DB object, which it allows you to do collection, which will give you an insert one object or method. I think this should be async. I guess that doesn't matter, does it? And then after calling insert one, that returns you an object with ops in it that has an array of one idea, and we're just mocking out that it returns you the exact same thing. So with all of that, let's see if we can actually run this test and see if it crashes or whatever. All right. So it crashed inside the actual thing here. Technically, we don't need to await on it. All right, so our test is verifying that we get back one object. But I think the way we have the code written, it's returning ops and all this stuff. So we need to make sure that we just return. Okay, first of all, created idea is going to be an object that is created after we await on that call, and then we can say return. Let's see. I'll say const result, and then I'm going to say const created idea is equal to results dot ops of 0. So we have a failing test, and it actually is verifying that we should only be returning an idea back. But we saw that as returning like all this extra information. So we are actually now refactoring or cleaning up our implementation to only return the single idea that was created. So at this point, I should be able to run my test, and hopefully that works. Failed again. Why is it failing? Await. Cannot use the keyword await outside of an async function. Okay, so I need to make sure I put async here. I need to set up ESLint on this project because a lot of the stuff would have been caught with ESLint. Awesome. Okay, so we have a passing test now. So we saw the process. We created a test first. We kind of mocked out that MongoDB DB object that you can call collection insert one. And then we expected that this method returns us a single idea that was created. And after we wrote that, we then started implementing this create idea function, which makes the MongoDB call, gets the result that was added, and then returns it. And there's probably a lot more error catching you could do. Like for instance, let's say you try to insert it and it crashes for whatever reason. You should probably have a try catch there to make sure that you return like null or something, but that's for another day. And again, you might say, okay, what is the point of all this extra logic? Like, why do we have a function that wraps this stuff? I could have just put this all on a single like endpoint inside of my route here, right? Like all of that logic could have just lived here. And honestly, it could have. But as your project grows, it gets more complex, and you want to have your stuff isolated. So in case you ever decide to change, for example, if we decide to use something instead of Mongo, now all I need to do is just pass the different like DB object in. Or not DB object. Let's see, in my interactor, let me close all this stuff. So again, why are we doing all this stuff? Well, basically in my interactor, which we haven't written yet, if let's say for whatever reason you didn't want to use MongoDB, you could actually call a different persistence method. And we will, I guess I could talk that more in a second, but let's do another test to do TDD on this interactor here. So again, let's just create a create idea interactor.test.js. Describe create idea interactor, and that is going to do some stuff. What is it going to do? I don't know. We'll figure that out. So we got our test and we have our implementation. And okay, so one thing I don't really like is that we have DB passed in. I'm not sure if I'm a big fan of that, but we need to also pass in the persistence method that we want this interactor to invoke, right? If you're doing inversion of control for your dependencies, I could, honestly, I could go up here and I could just require that persistence method in, so I can call it to actually like store something in the dynamo. But then you're making this interactor dependent on Mongo, right? Again, the example is if you switch from Mongo to like DynamoDB, or you switch from Mongo to MySQL, you don't want all of your code dependent on an external third party like database. Instead, you want to just call an interface that abstracts it. And that is kind of what we're doing here. So basically, we want to make sure that we pass in the method for creating that idea. So I'm going to assume that create idea is passed in the method signature, and that's going to be able to be invoked. And that will have to like bubble up. We'll have to actually pass that in here in this factory here, the handler factory. Because inside of these handler factories, this is the abstraction that kind of, you know, is going to change if you're using Express or serverless Lambda, or I don't know, maybe something else like Koa. Is that one? Koa? Or Happy? Joy? I don't know. Anyway, I'm kind of jumping around. Let's go back. We're trying to write a test for testing out this interactor that we're about to write. And we want to verify that it should return an idea that was passed in, or something like that. So we could import in this, we could say const create idea interactor is equal to require create idea interactor. So we bring in that method that we're trying to test, and then we call it, and we need to pass it some things, and that's going to return something to us. So const result is equal to that. Expect result to equal something, I guess. Okay, this should be idea. So what our test is going to do is we invoke our interactor. That should return an idea. The idea should equal to whatever we passed in. So again, we need to pass in DB here. Technically, we don't need to pass in DB because our interactor doesn't need to use DB. Okay, so it could just be undefined. I think that's fine. But what we do need to pass in is that create idea function, and we need to mock that out. And I need to wrap up my stream. So I may continue this later. Thank you all for watching if there's anyone watching right now. Later, my child woke up. I gotta watch her.